once again. Welcome to the Perceptional, elevating all your senses, expanding your curiosity. So plug in now as we welcome your host, Dr. James Donito.
Welcome back once again to the Perceptional. This is episode number 11, and we are going to be a little bit quantum today, a little bit philosophical, and certainly scientific and commonsensical. Today, our topic has a lot to do with how we treat each other. We have a world that has always been very cruel to each other. We see this especially with the excuse of war, and there's a lot of that very visible to us now with the internet, the atrocities of what people will do when they, quote, have an enemy that wronged them in some manner. So what we have to do to understand the present state of fear and the chronic, constant state of conflict, I believe we have not been forced to think deep enough about what it is that we are using in our decision-making processes for our own longevity, for our ability to want to live a long life. Now, how I began this thought process was by trying to define life around me. If I see something that is, quote, biologically alive, and it could be a microscopic unicellular organism all the way up to the most complex forms of life, and we hope for at the top of that tree, we say, well, all that's alive. It has biology. It has consciousness. And consciousness can be defined as the ability to interact with the environment outside of its own boundaries in a manner for its survival, interpret and even anticipate that. So there's a lot of things that are alive. But then when we start stepping up the tree a little bit, we're going to say, but what about sentience, sentient beings? We used to think we were the only ones, and my gosh, the list is growing and growing as to what is sentience. The ability to be self-aware is a great definition. Now, the internet is filled with all kinds of definitions and legal ways of trying to define sentience. And this may have to do with animal rights groups, for instance, trying to put a perspective on how we treat animals or even what we eat. The ability to be self-aware, though, could be looking in the mirror and seeing yourself again and go, I know that handsome fellow in the mirror. But on the other hand, what if it's the ability to have no mirrors, but you know other members of your group, recognizing differences of individuals? If you can do that, you can recognize you are different from them as well. Other definitions go further, and that is the ability to experience a variety of stimuli and then remember them and then respond differently to them, such as pain. The ability to feel pain, therefore, if you can feel pain and we can demonstrate it in some manner, then you are sentient. Well, we're got to be higher than that because that's a lot of things that can feel pain, especially our favorite pets. So what makes us better than just a sentient being? The ability to recognize something inside of you that animates you, that says, let me out of here. What am I doing on this hellhole planet or in this weak, dilapidated body? And we have developed our religions to understand our spirituality. The ability to question your purpose and when you will leave and how and where you'll go, that is a higher level of sentience. That is almost no other way to be defining that except the human. And that level to do that should allow us to behave better than all the other sentient beings who seem to be very set on their own self-survival, of course, and we see fighting amongst the tribes in any type of pack over food, over dominance, and yet we're still behaving the same way. When we try and understand then how we should be better than that, we have to go to another scale because showing our spiritual development and awareness doesn't seem to help us living a long potential life, because there are things that aren't even sentient, perhaps, that are outliving us, mocking our short little lifespans. What am I talking about here? So let's go to the aging process when there seems to be a true biological clock. That would be probably mostly insects. Think about how many things are brought into life, hatched, whatever you want to call it, and they are gone in hours, days, weeks, a few months, one season, and then they're gone. They don't age. There's no signs of aging on them. They exist, and then they just sit down and they cease to exist. I always wonder where most of these carcasses go. They get recycled, hiding away somewhere, but I don't see many dead birds, and they only have a limited lifespan. It seems they are on a program clock as well, and then they go. Intelligent life forms, even in the ocean, the octopus, for instance, very intelligent, and yet it seems to have a clock, and there's very little signs of aging on the octopus. It just seems to have a clock that says time's run out. What we want to do is say, well, there's a lot of life that is aging. They are showing some potential that could be 10 years down the road or 20, and there's differences as to what makes that life form capable of living that amount of time. Choices of its diet and lifestyle, yes. Genetics, yes. Environment, yes. But what about things that are living hundreds of years, thousands of years? You find a tortoise in the ocean, count whatever markings on its shell, and you'll see this thing's 200 years old. A lot of sea animals can be found to be very old sharks, very old lobsters have been found, but that's nothing compared to trees. We have some of these amazing big trees that are in the thousands of years old. And don't quote me on this, there may be a tree well over 10,000 years old. And how does a tree live that long? So those are the things where I started thinking, well, I don't even think anybody would agree the tree is sentient the way we know it, but maybe there is something in there. But if it's living so much longer, I don't think it's contemplating its purpose here. So that attribute to the potential level of sentience doesn't seem to imply anything. And I doubt the turtle swimming around in its wonderful little cold ocean by itself has any deep thoughts either about why it's here. Otherwise, life would get pretty boring down there. It just lives day to day in a marvelously open manner. So what I'm trying to do here is develop a new scale to put us on so that we can make sense of some of our day-to-day observations and decisions. And the reason we want to take a different perspective is because the drug industry, driven by natural things, psilocybin and ayahuasca and LSD and peyotes, but everybody who just can't take it anymore and their PTSD and their this label and that, and they go take a trip, one-day trip, one couple-hour trip even, and they have seen this whole world for what it really is, the illusion as they kind of show it, and they come back and they behave differently. Often, they want to live longer. They want to be a nicer person. So we need some perspectives, but we all don't necessarily need to go run out and take some drugs. So now I have a theory that the longevity of these incredibly long-lived organisms, these life forms, animal or plant, has to do with their armor. Look at the armor of the turtle, the other sea creatures. We mentioned the thick shark skin, the rock-hard shell of the lobster, the incredible bark of these big, wonderfully long-lived trees, bark that could be over a foot or two thick in places, that is impervious to fire, that has chemicals in it that nothing can get through. There is a form of armor that can also be protective, but it could be chemical. What if there was something that we would define in the venom industry of the defenses of the reptilians especially, but anything that has a venom, that's a form of its armor. It can push away a threat from it, buy itself some more time. There could be chemicals in bloodstream. Is the inner lining of my sinus a protective layer? Yes. Did it keep COVID from getting into me? Yes, because of the chemistry, but that's a soft armor, so to speak. We have armor because we have boundaries. So a cell has a boundary all the way out to the larger organisms. So now we might think, well, gosh, our armor is pretty pathetic. We don't have anything near what some of these other long-lived creatures have. We need some hair on us like Bigfoot again. That ought to add some years to your life from temperature threats alone to the system. So where is our armor? Our armor is we build it around us. And we have developed layers of clothing, our buildings, our weapons that we can kill each other with too. But we have to extend our armor outward in here. So if we look at how far we're capable of putting our armor, it still is not going to buy us the kind of time that a giant tree will get us, thousands of years. And we have therefore had to step back and look at when we do take a hit, when we do have something that accelerates the aging process in our body, and it could be an exposure to a pathogen, microbe, a toxin, a non-biological substance, a trauma, we have to repair that. And if we could keep repairing things, then that may be a better armor than having a good tortoise shell on you might be. So when we start seeing these potentials, we now can step back and perhaps take a different look at how all of this comes together that I'm going to show you why you want to live a longer life and how to do it. So let's start with the building blocks, the cells. Every cell in your body has a code that can survive all by itself. It's its own little city, its own little world in there, and then we put collective together and it becomes more than that. That's what the word holistic means. The sum is greater than the parts. What if we also look at individual organs like the brain? The brain has neurons and it has other supportive cells. We'll just call them glial cells. They're the maintenance guys, but the neurons have been showing us some amazing things lately. We have, for instance, seen that one individual neuron is what initiates a domino effect, a cascade of sleep. So the brain doesn't decide as a collective. It's one little cell that starts as a leader and everybody follows, creating the collective amount of changes that the brain needs to go to sleep. There was a trigger for that one cell, or did it have a firsthand threat to it of something that says, I need to shut down? That's what sleep is. And the rest of the cell said, oh, well, if you're doing it, we need to do it too. That's just what happens. But if we talk about that cell's memory of the experiences that made it make that decision that it wants to go to sleep, we can use that at the same time to look at our immune system's memory. The medical profession, wrong about a lot of things, has decided that your immune memory is measurable by the presence of antibodies. Now, an antibody is basically a protein structure that's structured in such a way that this is a threat. It builds something never before been built in you that'll fit perfectly around here and lead to the elimination of that threat. We can transfer antibodies into you directly through food sources, through placental transfer, and even targeted beverages like colostrum, for instance, and we could put antibodies in. There's a nice expensive gamma globulin IV infusion you can get if you're really sick at the hospital, antibodies, so to speak, and they'll go right to work in you. They don't care who you are, so to speak. But the antibody has been measured into current antibodies and older ones. And you can ask the immune system different ways, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine, but you still find this old, new. And if you find old antibodies, the assumption is that that's prior immunity, prior exposure, and if you ever get exposed to it again, you'll be fine. The problem with that theory is the plethora of things that you have to remember from prior generations being on this planet. Remember, it's a cumulative process to just your lifespan alone. If every one of those threats had to have antibodies in significant amounts in your blood would be solid glue. When there's antibodies in your blood, what it means is that that threat, that organism, is still in you, but it's sequestered, so it's not actively expressing itself. Therefore, the memory of what immunity really is deeper than that. So if a person has hepatitis C, a virus, so that we can say is defeatable. It can be eliminated from the body. You can test for its presence, use a certain drug or nutritional regime, and get rid of this thing. And then eventually the antibodies go away, fairly shortly, sometimes a year or two at the most. Does that mean if those antibodies aren't there that if you get hepatitis C again, your body is going to start from scratch? No. The memory is stored in DNA. and that is the greatest repository of data ever understood. The computers that we know today are moving towards a hardware-software structure mimicking DNA because of its efficient storage of vast amounts of information. So there's a kind of a memory vibration, so to speak, in here. So when we get into the ability to remember in a genetic code how to defend yourself against something, or the memory in one cell's genetic code that it's time to go to sleep, we can go on and on about the individuality becoming something greater, the collective. But here's the thing I'm saying they all have in common. They all want to live. All of those mechanisms are about your survival. And so individually, everywhere we look at something, its behavior is all about trying to get you to survive. And therefore, it's up to you with that run in the background to thrive during the day. Have a good time, enjoy this planet and the experiences with it as long as you possibly can. And that's where we're starting to get in trouble, because we start questioning, why do I want to stay if there might be something better out there? So here's where the curse begins. If we are this highly sentient life form capable of contemplating our purpose here, we come to the conclusion, we have to conclude this, that there is something else out there that is bigger than us, has given us a purpose to react and interact with it. And we have to say to ourselves, it's got to be better than this. And we have a lot of examples that, without offending, I don't care if I do offend some of the religions, there's a lot of evidence that we can be interacting with that next dimension of where our soul/spirit is going. And I don't get me into what the soul is different than the spirit. We can play that game all day long, but they're both something that may not exist anymore in this body once it dies and they go, or it goes off somewhere. What we're saying, though, is if we have this confidence that something's going to be really, really good when we get out of here, and we see how hard it is to find the good things every day to keep going on, because we're contemplating the future, trying to predict good things, be aware of bad things, but doggone it, we see that light at the end of the tunnel. We see that we've got something really good waiting for us in our deepest faith. And then we have to sit back and face another day so that we stay here in spite of our urge to want to leave. How many people have gone to the other side, life after death experience, and said how hard it was to come back here because it was so beautiful on the other side? So what are we doing when we have to wrestle this conundrum? The long-lived things of this planet with all the armor aren't thinking about that, and therefore they don't become suicidal. But because in the back of our minds we recognize the struggle and we want to respect the gift of being here, but we start committing suicide by our daily actions of the pleasures of life. And that's back to what I was saying before, that suicide is not always about a short, dramatic moment that your life ends. It is a slow process that no one will call it suicide, but you got a disease of some sort, and that is the badge that you wear, that cancer took him or her, or a heart attack took him or her, or pneumonia or something like that. But how that disease came about was because your immune system failed. And your immune system was slowly failing over all this time. And the biggest thing that our immune systems fail from is our mind's demise, of our happiness quotient going down, of our purpose in life overriding the purpose of being a good spiritual being and getting out of here, overriding the deepest things that say, stay here as long as you can, and here's how you do it. Everything that's fun for you, don't do it. Sit down here, cautiously avoiding all the things that could harm you, cautiously avoiding everything that makes you feel more relaxed. Maybe it's alcohol, maybe it's your cigarette, maybe it's your marijuana. Anything that is the vices, as we call it, has a price to pay, as we say, where it's going to start taking years off your life. Even just sitting on your butt all day long. They got that as the new smoking right now. How many minutes a day you sit can be calculated how many minutes they may shave off of your life down in the long run, because you are not doing what life is supposed to be, is get out there and work, break some calories out and create something, move, and interact with the environment around it. So here we are. We understand then that we are these wonderfully sentient, self-aware beings who have contemplated that we're going to a better place. We have plenty of evidence that makes us confident in that. We see that everything we do and it makes us feel good while we're down here, besides the daily survival things. We did our survival stuff. Now it's time to have some fun and thrive. And everybody says, but that's going to take years off your life. And so we consume it. We imbibe it anyway, knowing that this is going to be a little nip off the end there. No one will blame me because a disease will be labeled on me and I won't be labeled as suicidal. But honestly, the old India saying that man does not die, he slowly kills himself, may not be so far off from the truth. So are we all committing slow suicide? And what am I supposed to do about that? Because I've now given you some enlightenment, but I probably made you all very depressed. So I come up with a higher spiritual solution to this conundrum, and that is, if indeed this other reality exists where we're going, I think the reward for us to find that compromise and do as best we can, balancing things that are good for you and things that feel good, and get as long a life as possible, amplifying your armor as much as you can, show the efforts, because the possibility of coming back here over and over again should get you so motivated to reward something above you that is part of this experience on here, that for me, I don't find the discipline for myself. I find it for something bigger than me. And that's about the best I can give you. But let me end this with some amazing observation they had in the scientific community of the process of dying. You take people on these life support devices, and these are intubated people. These are people where the family has finally reached a decision to pull the plug. And the scientific community got permission to measure a lot of things about the brain, brainwave activities electrically, thermally, to see what the brain does during the process of once they turned off the power to keep basic fundamental functions going on you. And here's where it got really amazing. You get down to all of the electrical data at baseline when you're on a respirator and ventilators and life support in general. Once they turned off all of that equipment and the body ceases to breathe and the heart eventually stops within minutes. But after 10 to 12 minutes, the brain starts lighting up. One center after another turning on. Everything that is about being fully conscious lights up for 3 or so minutes, and then it settles back down and goes to its furthest level where full clinical death is now out 15, 18 minutes. What happened in the brain was not observable in that person's body. They showed no signs of twitching or whatever would be that, oh my gosh, plug them back in, but their brain was fully awake. Was it a download? Was it that come back in and take one last look around and maybe there was a chance you could decide to come back into this reality? But whatever it is, it shows us once again how little we know about what is animating our body, but something's in there and it's truly amazing. Now, my thought was, maybe if you're trying to resuscitate these people, what if you waited for that surge of activity, then start putting paddles on them and shaking them and trying to stimulate them? Maybe that's a window where you could bring them back if that was so important as a member of your loved one's family. Just a scientific thought on a deep philosophical thought. So with that, good day, America.